I am a very like anxious swimmer. So I let my nerves
Mm.
I sort of let my nerves in before my race. I let those dark voices in my head take over a little bit. I don't let them get a complete hold on me, but they really help me motivate me. They push me further. And I feel like if I'm nervous for a race going into it, then I'm gonna perform better and gonna I'm gonna just swim my best race. And I always say it's like get nervous before, like I always tell my teammates like just get nervous. It'll push you. And the more adrenaline you have, the better it goes.
Swimmers! Swimmers! Take your marks.
Welcome to another episode of the Get Out Swim podcast. I'm your host, Seamus T. Quinn, and today I'm joined by Connecticut College's very own Justin Finkel. So, Justin, thanks for hopping on.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
For sure. Yeah. So, for those who don't know, Justin just he finished what I would call like a historic week of swimming for Connecticut College, and I mean, certainly for himself. So, he had 3 individual events that he swam at Division III NCAA Championships in Greensboro, North Carolina. So it began with the 500 freestyle, where Justin had a come from behind victory, setting a new lifetime best and becoming a national champion for the first time in his own career. And then he followed that up with a 200 freestyle swim, a 4th place finish, just off his best time set a few weekends back at the conference championships in the NESCAC conference. And then he ended the meet with a bang, swimming the 200 butterfly and another come from behind victory in a battle, very reminiscent of the year before, where he set an NCAA record time in a 1:43 in the 200 butterfly. And yeah, just capitalized on already a great season, really just left his mark again as a junior. He's still got another year, of college swimming here. So again, for those who don't know, Justin, just tremendous year, tremendous swims, and really exciting to watch from the visitors or from the viewing perspective. So, so let's just start. How would you assess the meet? Like when you came home, or even after that 200 fly was over and you had time to kind of like decompress and settle, from all the noise, I would call it. Like, what were those thoughts? Like, what were kind of the takeaways from the meet? And just like, yeah, how did you kind of settle it all down? And with that time to think, what were kind of those thoughts?
Well, there was obviously a lot. There were a lot of emotions that I needed to sort through and process, and a lot of people who reached out to me. So I think I started by just trying to reach back out to everyone who reached out to me. That was my main priority. Just I saw so much support, and it really made me so happy, almost as happy as my swims made me. But yeah, I've looked back a little bit on my races individually, and I've kind of come to this realization. It's like I've set these goals since I'd say freshman year, and now that I've achieved these goals, I think a problem that I'm going to have is where do I go from here? And I've definitely been thinking about that these last couple of days. But in terms of just assessing how the meet went, obviously it went amazing. I don't think I could have asked for a better performance. I surprised myself in both the 500 and the 200 fly, and those are, I mean, like, I don't know how to top those races. Those some of the best races, probably the 2 best races I've had in my entire life. And I just trying to analyze like the parts that I did well, the parts that I did bad. I think everything came together well in those races specifically. I mean, maybe my starts could have been better, but every other technical thing that I've been working on for a while came together well, and they all paid off at the end. And yeah, there's just been this. I've been looking back on it a lot, and makes me happy every time, I guess.
No, that's great. I mean, and you talked about like kind of having goals since freshman year, where, because you've made NCAAs every year, and you kind of finished freshman year with kind of that 9th place finish in the 2 fly, kind of setting up your sophomore season. Sophomore season, you do great. I mean, you're national runner up in the 5 free and the 2 fly, both the events that you end up winning your junior year this year. But like, what were, like, did you have goals going into this meet, and were they to just simply like, or not simply, but were they to win the national title, or were they time-based? Like, did you have goals or expectations that you set for yourself after NESCACs, or was it more like, I'm just going to go in, see what I can do, and hopefully walk away with some best times and, national titles, if that's a possibility?
Yeah, for sure. I definitely set both time-based and placement-based goals for this meet. I saw how well I did last season. I kind of got a taste for that podium, and I wanted to win at least one event. I think that was my placement-based goal. But the time-based goal got a little bit more complicated. I mean, I saw where I was last year in regards to this year, and like my conference. I think I compared my NESCAC times that I went at my conference championship this year to my NCAA times last year, and I noticed that I wasn't experiencing as much drop in time as I guess I've been used to up until this point. I'm still ahead. I was still in a good position compared to the previous year, but I noticed I was a little plateauing a little bit in regards to the time. So I think my mindset shifted more from the time-based goals to placement-based goals, just trying to race the kid next to me or race the kid who's trying to outtouch me, just try and get my hands on the wall first. And I practicing alone, since I was the only person on my team, that it was a bit of a challenge because I didn't really have anyone to practice that out touching on, so to speak. But that definitely was a challenge, but I think I executed it well. My times also, I also had the mindset where if I went a time that I wanted to go, these time goals that I set, they were pretty ambitious. And if I went those times, then I would also end up probably winning the event as well. Like my 421 500 freestyle, for example, no one really on paper was like around there. If I went my time that I did last season, went up 421, then theoretically I would have won the event as well. And also I would have been very happy with a 421 just because of my NESCAC time. I went a 424. So getting back down to that 421 threshold just was a bit of a confidence boost, and it made me happy that I was around the same place as I was the previous year. But yeah, the placement sort of came with the time. Although I think also the time came with the placement, just because I am a lot better of a swimmer when I have somebody to race. And then luckily in both of my two best races, I had another swimmer who was right along with me and who I luckily chased down. I think my times would not have been that low if I didn't have someone like that to race. So everything sort of came together well, including my my competition. So
Yeah, no, definitely. And we're going to get to that sort of trademark chase down in a little bit,
Okay.
and then just kind of how you lock in for that. But first, I want to know, I mean, you mentioned kind of having to regroup, train alone as the, sole NCAA qualifier for Con this year. So like, what was kind of the game plan that you and Coach Benvenuti kind of laid out for yourselves, knowing, okay, NCAA's is going to be that end goal, but at the same time, we want to do well at NESCACs. We want to, post some good times. We want to use that opportunity to obviously compete with some of the best in Division III within the NESCAC. So how did you kind of lay out a game plan for NESCACs, but then also regrouping, knowing that you may have to train alone for NCAA's?
Yeah. So my game plan for NESCACs, so to speak, was nothing different than any of my teammates. I followed the same taper schedule, followed the same regimen as everyone else on the team. And I sort of went in with the mindset as okay, I need to get these times to make it to NCAAs, even though my times in season were pretty close to the entry times, if not on the entry times. I didn't really create this elaborate scheme to taper only for NCAAs. I just tapered normally as I did for NESCACs. And then once NESCACs was over, once I performed how I wanted to perform, then I sort of shifted gears over to, okay, now what do I do for NCAAs? And I talked to Coach a bit about that. But I feel like my training would have altered depending on how many people made NCAAs on the team. So that could have been like times of practices, sheer amounts of practices. When we found out that it was only me going to Greensboro, I met with coach and sort of structured a practice schedule around my class schedule. And it was definitely a luxury, but it was a little lonely at times for sure. But yeah, it was the structuring was all right. I think our plan in regards to training was focusing in on specifically my races, which was another positive aspect of training alone. So I was able to do a lot of 200 fly 50s just at my pace, 500 free, hundreds or 50s. It was very like personalized just because I was able to get all of coach's attention. And again, something that was a luxury. But yeah, there were definitely downsides to it as well. With the competition aspect of the practice, I was a little bit nervous while I was training for that month in between my conference championships. I was a little bit nervous because I wasn't sure if the taper was working because I had nobody to race. Usually, like knowing how good of a person or how good of a competitor I am when I have someone to race, having no one to race at practice doesn't really translate too well to tapering for like a competition like that. But
Right.
I definitely had my doubts along the way, but our plan went accordingly. The pace definitely helped out. Was able to bang out a couple perfect 50s right before my 200 fly on I think Friday and then I was able to bang out some perfect paces. So by hammering in that pace over and over again, I think it sort of tricked my brain into you don't need someone to race, but if you have someone to race, it'll go better. So that's sort of where the training paid off, and I was able to see that directly translate. But yeah.
So like talk a bit more about that, like you said, kind of building confidence. Not necessarily from having teammates around you or even people to race like you had in previous years, but just kind of dialing in that pace with Coach Benvenuti and knowing, okay, we've got each other's full attention here. We're going to work together to try and make these goals a reality. So was that where it sounds like that confidence drew from, like dialing in a specific pace for the 5 free, for the 2 free, for the 2 fly. So what were maybe like some specifics, whether it was just like in workouts, like what could be like a typical pace sort of set that coach would throw at you that you would, okay, this is where I can dial it in. This is where I can really build that. Maybe dig more into that.
Okay. Yeah, of course. I'd say an example of a set would be we would do like 450s and then 100 450s. I could do 2 of them at 200 fly pace, 2 of them at 200 free pace, and then the 100 would be at 500 free pace. But scattered in there, they'd be easy and the typical like intervals, like a lot of rest, easy stuff you'd see towards the end of taper. The week after conferences, I was at 6,000 plus yards per practice. So I built back up. But yeah, towards the end, those were the types of sets I was seeing. One thing I'd say that was really nice about the pace work that I did, and again, this comes with being alone for my training. I sort of never really experienced pace work like this, where coach knew my exact pace down to like the 10th of maybe 100th, not 100th, down to the 10th of my 50. And it was just like, if I was 2/10 too high or 2/10 too low, he would be like, all right, pick it up a little bit, or maybe hold back a little bit. Or he could be like, well, that was your first 50, or that was your second 50. Do you want that to be your third 50 or your 200? Very technical work. And that also gave me a sense of how I want to be racing for those 200s. Not so much for the 500 free. We did first 100 of 500 free, but then the 500 free gets complicated. It can, like, the middle gets conglomerated with varying pace depending on how you feel. But yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think we really trained much of the last 50 or last 100 of my 500 or 200s, just because having some experience in college swimming, like, we both know, we both were under the assumption that if I had somebody to race, I would give it my all. Which, I mean, I guess I did.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like I'm a really good last 50 swimmer. So some of those some of the strengths that I had going into it, we didn't really work on too much. And that's, again, something that came along with practicing alone. So
Definitely. Yeah, no, that's good. I mean, I know Coach Benvenuti, Coach Solomon would be the same over at Wellesley, and he'd be big on his 200 strategy being pace, build, race. So he loved just, pacing out first 50, first 100, building the third 50, and then racing on the last 50. So sounds like that might be similar to kind of the strategy you guys had for your 200s. But yeah, talk to me, like, what was the strategy for, let's say, your 2 fly and then your 5 free? Because obviously when you're in the race, stuff can go, sideways when it comes to getting in a race with someone else, or kind of just getting away from your pace, maybe just because you're in a race. Like, you can't really account for what's going to happen in the actual moment. So yeah, as much as you dialed in that pace, like, what was the game plan for the 2 fly? Was it kind of like pace, build, race, or was it, something different? And same for the 5 free. How did you kind of like assess what was the strategy?
yeah. So there's a lot to unpack in this question, just because I had 4 different races.
Yeah.
I had prelims 5 free, finals 5 free, prelims 2
Right.
fly, finals 5,
Right.
finals 2 fly. But each race was unique in its own. I could start with prelims 5 free, since that was
Yeah.
like the first day. But yeah, that race was really just feeling the waters with how I feel for the meet. Strategy, obviously, this was a placement strategy. Wanted to make the A final to give myself a shot at winning it at night. But also just seeing how I felt, seeing how my turns were, just getting a feel for the blocks, just every technical thing, because that was my first race. Luckily, it was a longer race. It was like a 20-lap race, so I was able to experience it for a little bit longer than most races. But strategy going into that was definitely less on my pace. It was more so just putting up a time that would get me into the A final. My strategy at night, that was also a placement strategy. I wanted to win it, obviously, but I think it shifted more so from just getting the placement to how am I going to win it, and with the time. So I did a couple 50s in between at pace. I think my 500 free pace was 26 low. I was trying to break 420, and so doing those 26 lows really dialed me in for how I need to swim that race. But yeah, my strategy for my finals 5 free was get out there. If there's somebody, get out there going my pace. If there's somebody with me on the last 50, last 100, chase them down. And I think that's exactly what I did. Just know, even at the end of a longer race like the 500, I just know that I'll have that final gear. So if I'm swimming a race that I want to swim, I'm pacing off someone who's either going my speed or going a speed that would be a new best time for me. As long as I have them in that last 100, then I will pick it up and ultimately finish. And that's what I ended up doing. I think it came back in like a 50 point in my 500 race.
But where does that final gear come from? I mean, you say you're gonna have it. If they're there. But where does that come from? Does that confidence come from training? Does that just you're gonna save a little bit by executing your plan? Like, where does that gear come from?
Yeah, definitely comes from saving a bit. I mean, I don't think I'd be able to just drop casually a 50 point if I wasn't saving up a little bit. Not saying that's what you should do in a race like that. I know my coach is probably clenching his fist at the thought of me saving up. But ultimately, when I'm in the race, I don't feel like I'm saving up. It's like
Yeah.
a subconscious final little, like, the way I like to compare it, I'd like to compare it to like dessert. You know, you always have room for a dessert.
Yeah.
I feel like I would always have room, no matter what race, for like that last kick in the end.
It's just
Just
how you've swam.
just how I am. And also, as a swimmer, as a person, I see this in most aspects of my life. I'm just a very competitive person. It doesn't matter who I'm competing against. It could even be my own teammates. I like winning, and I like just having that feeling. I feel like I'm a better person when I'm competing with someone else, and it just makes me into a better person. And definitely see that in my swimming. Whenever I have someone that I can catch, I always go for it. I always try and
Yeah.
get my hand on the wall first. So yeah, I don't really know how to completely explain it, but there's always like I will always have that last gear. Sometimes I touch into it. Sometimes I say to myself, all right, let's go, let's catch them. But I wish I had a better answer for that, but it's just always going to be there.
It's always, yeah. That's just,
Yeah.
that's where it's where you gain your confidence. You know,
Yeah.
that last kick is going to be there. If I want it, I'm going to go get it. Yeah.
Yeah. And
So now, okay. So
sorry.
now talk to me about, you can keep going, but afterwards transition into those 200s and sort of the strategy there too.
Yeah. Sure. My 200s. So wait, sorry. I forgot what.
Yeah, we could go, let's do this. Let's go. Okay, moving forward. Now let's go 200s, kind of walk me through prelims finals. You've just finally captured the national, title in the 500. Huge, moment of just elation, joy, and it's like you've got that monkey off your back of just being like, okay, I did it. Like, I won at best time. I got back down to 421. That was huge. So now you're riding what I would think would be like a little bit of confidence going into the 2 free and 2 fly. So what comes next there in the prelims and final swims?
Yeah, so that was definitely seen in my 2 free, the confidence that I had going in. The thing that I was going to say before is that I am a very like anxious swimmer. So I let my nerves I sort of let my nerves in before my race. I let those dark voices in my head take over a little bit. I don't let them get a complete hold on me, but they really help me, motivate me. They push me further. And I feel like if I'm nervous for a race going into it, then I'm going to perform better, and I'm going to just swim my best race. And I always say it's like get nervous before, like I always tell my teammates, like, just get nervous. It'll push you. And the more adrenaline you have, the better it goes. And riding that confidence from my 5 free to my 2 free definitely didn't help with that. So I was sitting high. I knew going into it, my 200 was my worst event of the meet. I just won a national championship, and I was kind of like, let's just see how this goes. I wasn't really nervous for it, and that was evident in the time that I went. I had a bit of a scare. I went a 37 high, and I almost missed the A final, which is kind of what I did last year. I placed, I think, 9th, and I missed the A final, and I ended up going a time that would have scored 3rd. And seeing that nearly happen again scared me a bit. I think also in finals, I was seeded 7th, when a time that was 2 seconds slower than my NESCAC time. I think not having those nerves coming off of that win was something that definitely harmed my time in the 200 freestyle. I feel like if perhaps I didn't win my 500 free, then I could have dropped some time in that. I would have been more nervous, more riled up. But I think that translated over to my 2 fly the day after. I came off that 4th place finish where I wish I did a little bit better. The time obviously wasn't what I wanted it to be. So I got back into that mindset where I was like, hey, get off whatever wave you were riding. You just went a 137. Like, let's dial in for this race. Get nervous. You have a big competitor. I have raced Frank Applebaum last year. I lost, and I got nervous. I wanted to win this year. So getting back into that mindset is something that I don't think I did until finals. I think prelims, I put up a 146, and I was just, again, not in my right headspace, and a lot of things were sloppy about my prelim swim. I think my strategy going into prelims was, again, put up a good time that would get me first, second, or even third, just get a central lane. So if I have someone to race, they'll be right there. But going on 146 didn't really get me that top 3 position.
Put you on the outside a little bit.
Yeah, and it honestly made me really frustrated. I was a 144 mid at my conference, and I was just like frustrated. I was like, what happened? Like, it's been a month. Like, my 5.3 was fine. What happened? Like, am I gonna do bad tonight? I started getting nervous, and then again, I spoke about this in my interview there, but my turns were atrocious in that morning swim. So shifting over to night, I did so many flat turns in between sessions there. I just hammered them out, and luckily when I swam my race, they were perfect, and I didn't really need to focus on the technical things. I could sort of focus on the racing aspect of it, which was honestly the best part about it. So then going into it, finally, my strategy for the finals 2 fly, I'd say I knew that I would probably be racing Frank at the end. He had a similar trajectory the year before, and we always have great races. So I knew that it would be a battle for the finish, and I kind of used that huge surge of nerves that I had going into it, that I sort of reestablished at night because of that frustration from the morning swim. And I used that to sort of let my adrenaline take over for the first 100. I went out a 49.7, which is one of the fastest I think I've ever gone out in a race like that. And it was just like, it didn't feel like it felt like I went out a 51 just because I had so much adrenaline. So I'd say I went out slower than I thought. The time was actually faster. So I went out pretty slow just so I'd have that final kick at the end. So I think my strategy ultimately was trying to negative split it, if I were to put it into simple terms. Go out slow, come back fast. But obviously the adrenaline took me out way faster than I was anticipating going out. And then luckily I had that final kick at the end. So
yeah. Wow. Could you see, because again, you're on the outside lane, so could you see Frank out of the corner? Because obviously the U Chicago, I'm forgetting his name, but he was right there too. Jesse, right. So he was the 100 fly net. So you got a loaded 3. You got, yourself, who's national champ in the 5 free. You got Jesse, who is national champ in the 100 fly, I think set an NCAA record. And then you have Frank, who is the NCAA record holder in the 2 fly, and who, was able to outlast you last year with your comeback. And so you guys got these this 3-headed monster coming into this last 100, all trying to outpoint each other. And so could you, see them out of your peripherals? Like, obviously Jesse's right next to you. Yeah. Could you see Frank? Okay. Cause he was pretty far out there. I mean, just from, again, the spectator point of view, we're watching, we're like, I don't know if he's going to do it. I mean, it looks like there's a little bit too much room. I don't know. Cause he looked like he was holding strong. So like, what is kind of your thinking when you turn at that 100 or at that 150 and seeing where he's at? Could you actually see him?
Yeah, I can see him. I'd say fear. That's what was going through my head. I was terrified because I saw my plan was being head and head going into the last 50. But every time I would turn on the start end, I would see, because the way I turn, I always turn on my left side. So I would see Frank and Jesse when I did those turns. But going into the last 50, I was head and head with Jesse. And Frank was already pushed off. He already pushed off and he was gone. So I was really scared going into that last 50. I know, looking back on it now, I didn't even see Frank on the first 100 turn. He went out at 48. I went out at 49. He was way ahead of me. And that was kind of discouraging. I was in, like I said, fear fuels me in my nerves. And once all that fear rushed through my body, something took over, and whatever last gear I had, it turned on, and I kicked as far as I could underwater, took off. I knew that Jesse wasn't going to hold it, just because I swam next to Jesse last year too, and he's more of a 100 swimmer. So he had an amazing 100, obviously. But I didn't take him as a last 50 swimmer. So I knew that last 50 I'd take off from him. But my main concern was catching Frank 2 lanes over. And it kind of sucked that he was 2 lanes over because I couldn't see him when I was actually swimming. But when I did my final turn, I saw him underwater, and yeah, he was ahead of me. So even that last 25, I just used every last morsel of energy I had, and
It's crazy.
yeah, I guess
because it literally, he didn't make it easy. I mean, it literally came down to the last 3 strokes, and you just were able to kind of have more. You just had more force going in. I mean, he was fading, tightening up, and so he didn't make it easy.
He didn't. No, he for sure gave me a run for my money, and even part of it was luck. Like I watching back the last 2 strokes, you could see my finish was perfect. I came around and like I didn't jam my finish. I didn't take an extra stroke. I didn't glide in. I had like a perfect finish, and he was sort of coming around. He didn't have the best finish. So
right,
since it came down to 0.1, I feel like either of us have a good finish, and it was their race. So like I said, those technical things that I worked in between my turns, I guess my finishes too, just all came in clutch at the end, and I was able to just truly race, and having those technical things fall in place, it really helped. And yeah.
What was the reaction just seeing, okay, I won 143.2, new NCAA record, because you just did the big like smack of the water celebration. So was that just like a release? Like, wow.
Yeah, I usually don't slap the water. Like that's
I
probably
noticed that. Yeah, you're more stoic. You don't really kind of like celebrate like that.
I know. That was probably like the 3rd or 4th time I've ever slapped the water after a race, just because I was so overwhelmed. It sort of took over, and I saw the time. I wasn't expecting to go that time. I wasn't expecting to go anywhere close to that time. I was expecting to go like a 144, maybe at best, maybe 143 high. But the fact that we broke the record by, or that I broke the record by that much, it was like sort of, I became engulfed with like just pure like energy and joy. And I guess slapping the water just, it came with it. And I guess maybe I got a little carried away, but
no, it was a what I would say is a fitting kind of end to, a race like that. Because I think whoever just, no matter how you express it, that's you're, like you said, you're overcome with joy. You can't even overthink something like that. It just happens in the moment, right?
It just happened in the moment. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, that's great. I want to dig in a little bit more. I mean, you had some great just perspective on your mindset and how you use nerves and fear and different things to fuel you. And interestingly enough, how maybe getting that confidence from your 5 free actually hindered your 2 free, because you didn't have that kind of monkey on your back. You didn't have that, okay, I'm nervous to see how this is going to go. I'm anxious. I don't know if I'm going to win, because you've already kind of experienced a really good race, a national champion title. So this will be how I'll frame this question. Like, talk to me more about your, like, let's take it through. Okay, what are you thinking when you're in the ready room? Like, you're in the ready room, you're getting ready for this A final of the 500 freestyle. Like, what's going through your mind? Are you someone who visualizes the race beforehand, or are you someone who just needs to let it happen in the moment? Or are you worried about your competitors? Like, what are you thinking about in that ready room?
Yeah, it varies per swim.
Right.
It varies whether I'm super nervous or, so I guess I can go race by race if that's
5 free. Let's start with the 5 free final.
5 free final. It was my first NCAA final race of the year. I was obviously super nervous. I really wanted to win. I think I thought to myself I had my best shot. I had the best shot of winning in this race, and I kind of looked at my competitors a little bit, and I saw their times in prelims, and I knew that I had to swim my own race to win it. I didn't really see Sam Dinstag's 421 coming out of there, but that's another story. When I'm in the ready room, especially for that 5 free, I remember thinking I was just like, anything can happen. And I was listening to music, and sort of trying to dial in, let all the distractions around me just sort of go away. Just let all the new nerves, all the I don't know the right word for it, but just all the emotions that I had from being there just sort of settle, and trying getting into this mindset where I can just race and focus on winning. And I think that's what I did in the ready room. I sat, they have chairs back there, and I just sat with my goggles on. I put them on a little bit early, and I just stared at the floor, listening to music. It was kind of like, I guess I kind of looked goofy doing it, but I
Yeah.
just
You were
dialed
just
in,
kind of
as
dialing it
much as
in.
I could. And when I do that, that also helps with the nerves. Like, I'm by no means a serious guy in general, but when I get into that space, I'm a better racer. When I get serious, don't have any other distractions, I get nervous, and I just let those negative emotions, I guess, overwhelm me, and that sort of helps me race, so to
You,
speak.
you you talk about music. What kind of music are you listening to? Is it something that you're like, it's really important what type of music, or is it more just there as like the noise distraction as you get into your right headspace?
No, I mean, it's songs that I feel like I wouldn't listen to them if I was just on a casual car ride. Like, there's songs that
Sure.
I've dedicated as like I'm in the zone right now, and I have a playlist actually called "In the Zone," and
Nice.
it's all songs that I listen to, and I'm like, okay, I could dial into this. Like some Travis Scott songs. I like rap, so there's a lot of rap in there, and I just sort of listen to those when I'm like behind the block. It doesn't really matter what song is playing in there. I don't need a specific song, but any
Mm,
song that helps me like dial in, get nervous, anything like that. I even
yeah.
have songs without lyrics in there, just like crazy instrumentals, like some people
Mm.
said, something that gets me pumped up. But
Yeah, so you need some upbeat, like
yeah,
hype type of music.
yeah,
Yeah,
for
that's
sure.
what you're going for. Yeah.
But going into the 200 ready room experience, nothing like the two fly and five free. I was joking around with the other guys who were in there. I wasn't dialed in really, and
Um,
it comparing that to my other two races, it's really evident how much it helps me to like really get in that mindset before a race like that. Like, I really need to just, I guess, not talk to anyone, not be my usual happy, like joking around self. And I feel like that's what happened in the two free. I was off this like off this champion performance. And it's just like, I wasn't really stressed for it. I wasn't dialed in. I didn't even bring my headphones back to the ready room for that race.
mm,
And
it's almost like there's not that sense of urgency
yeah,
as much.
not at
Yeah.
all. No sense of urgency all for the two free. And it's crazy to see that I can just add 2 seconds for that reason. I feel like I had a solid race in my two free. It was just, I didn't have that extra layer of adrenaline, which I usually get from dialing in that ready room. But
Right, right.
then going from that to my ugly two fly performance in the morning, and then that really sort of jolted me, scared me back into that dial in mode, which I think I was most dialed in for my two fly out of any race on Friday in the ready room. I didn't speak a single word to anyone else, went right in, sat in that chair, and yeah, put on as much clothes as I could, got as warm as I could, and just listened to my In the Zone playlist and let myself crank in, dial in, and that was that.
Mm. Are you someone who's like looking around, like, 'cause you said you're kind of looking at the floor, but are you looking around at, like Frank or Jess, like anyone who's like, is going to be a real contender in this event? Are you looking at what they're doing and kind of, just kind of seeing what they're up to, or letting that kind of seep into the fear that you're talking about and the nervousness? Or are you really like, I know I'm already very nervous and I'm already kind of trying to channel this and be in the moment, and so I'm just gonna, focus in on my own thing? Or are you kind of like looking around and kind of scanning?
Yeah, I feel like subconsciously, as I
Mm,
walk in, I see them. I take a glance around, but I would say it's never my focus. As much as I like racing, I want to swim my own race, and feel like by interacting with other swimmers in the ready room, that's sort of where I fall short. That's what I did in my 2 free, and I think that's where it showed up. But yeah, subconsciously I look around, I see what they're doing. Sometimes if they're doing something that I want to do, maybe I'll copy, like they're swinging their arms, fine, I'll swing my arms. But yeah, I think I sort of stay static. I sit down, not really doing anything crazy, but yeah, I sort of focus on myself.
Is there anything really, like, I don't know, goofy that you've seen as far as like someone's pre-race ritual from, like, I don't know, it could be anyone, like a competitor or a teammate, like does anyone have like a pretty goofy kind of routine or unusual, like what I would say?
I wouldn't say this year. I guess there was maybe 1 2-fly swimmer. I won't say their name, but yeah, I think they made me laugh right when I was walking into the room, but then I dialed in. But they didn't really seem as dialed in as I would have been. Like I was like so locked in there, but they were kind of cracking jokes. I'd say last year, I don't remember his name, but there was another kid in my 2-fly. He was shadow boxing, which was kind of funny. But yeah, that made me laugh. That kind of threw me off a bit for my race, but I luckily I was able to just dial in. I like that I wear headphones that are noise canceling, so I don't really hear their dialogue at all. And I blast my music, just get in my own zone. But yeah, the shadow boxing threw me off a bit last year, but nothing.
Yeah, the shadow boxing, that's different a little bit.
Here.
Yeah. No, I know of some swimmers, like some pros who I talked about it with one other coach. It was like I think it's like Bruno Fratus, but he like does push-ups and like, or like, you know, people will actually just pump out push-ups and almost get their heart rate up. I think it's more for sprinters probably than like distance swimmers, but yeah. I was just curious. But and then transition away from the ready room to behind the block. Like, what's your maybe routine? Just as far as getting yourself behind the block, are you wiping the block down with a towel? Are you checking, to make sure it's adjusted to you? And then you're kind of taking off your clothes and you're getting ready, or are you trying to leave those headphones on to the last second? Kind of what's the routine behind the block? And then are you just letting yourself go and be in the moment? Or are you like, oh my God, this is scary, this is nervous? Like,
yeah. I think definitely I try and, so when they walk us out, depending on where I am in the lane, I think I walk out completely clothed. I have my headphones on, don't change anything. And then that's where I really start like shaking out my arms, shaking out my legs, just sort of like hitting myself, getting ready, take off my headphones, take off my clothes, adjust the block. One thing that I noticed I've been replicating every race is I adjust the block wedge to where I want it, and then I like smack it hard. And like, that's where I sort of like start my routine of shaking out, stretching, doing some dynamic stretches. But I tend to leave my clothes on and headphones on last minute. Personally, I like getting my cap and goggles on before I like undress. So I'll walk out with my cap and goggles on, probably with a scowl, just because I'm so dialed in.
Right.
Yeah, that's about it. And then shaking out my arms and taking deep breaths. Those are the things that I do before every race, just sort of keep it loose, not so stiff,
Right.
and taking deep breaths. Sometimes I find that I have better lung capacity when I do that. Maybe it's a placebo, but who knows? It also helps me just sort of dial in even more. Everything I really do is just to dial in, but
right, to be in that moment.
Taking those deep breaths. I think sometimes I even unlock my fight or flight. Like it's so it's when I take those deep breaths, I feel like, okay, I need to go. Like I need to go now. So
right.
I feel like the mental aspect of my pre-race ritual is definitely what makes me or what contributes to my racing the most. So
yeah. Are you someone who visualizes like beforehand, like the night before? Are you visualizing how it's going to go and sort of your routine? And okay, this is what I want the race to look like, 50 by 50 or 25 by 25. This is how I want to feel. Or is visualization not so much in your practice?
Well, I try my best to visualize the night before, but sometimes I try not to, so I can actually get sleep, because The nerves
The
from
nerves,
that
yeah.
will keep me up, and I'll keep visualizing over and over again this race
Right.
that I want to have. And a lot of times when I visualize that race that I want to have, it it involves other swimmers in the heat and like where I'm gonna be in regards to them and like when I'm gonna have to make my move. And sometimes I watch film, like I watched the recording from my last year's two fly, just because there were a lot of familiar faces. And yeah, sort of see where I fell short. But visualizing that race, I think I have to do it in moderation because it'll overwhelm me, it'll take over. And
Mm,
yes, I do it, but I'm not going to be obsessing over it. It's not going to be something that I'm going to be, thinking about constantly going into it. Um,
right.
so
Right.
I think once I get there, once I see how I feel, that's when I truly like dial in and find my inner strategy, so to speak.
Right.
So
That makes total sense. Yeah. Um, okay. Last question, kind of wrapping it up. I appreciate you kind of taking us all through sort of the mindset, because I think it really is so important to share, just how swimmers approach their races,
yeah,
especially
of course.
when you're able to execute it like that. Because I know myself, like I was a really like you. I mean, I was an anxious swimmer. Like I wasn't someone who always felt very comfortable and loose and like easy behind the blocks. Like I would get really anxious, and it took me a while to like find the right tools to channel like the best version of myself without letting the nerves kind of just like kind of negatively affect my race, at least. So I think it's important that you share on those. But yeah, like looking forward, kind of, I don't know, like, do you allow yourself to, because you even said like now I've set these this high bar, these high markers, like do you allow yourself to already think about next year or kind of goals that you would have even moving forward? In the summer, are you looking to maybe go for, after a break from swimming, go for maybe an Olympic trial cut, kind of ride this momentum? Or yeah, where do you kind of go from here and sort of looking forward?
Yeah, so I think in terms of next season, it's going to take some structuring for my goals. Honestly, I'd say right now, if I were to just pick out some goals, it'd be obviously beat my own goal time or beat my own times from this year. Um, try and improve in every way I can. Um, obviously, 200 free needs some work, but yeah, I think my coach mentioned he had a plan for that. So I'm gonna love to hear what he has to say. Um, but yeah, about Olympic trials. So I did the time trial at the end of the meet, and I was nowhere close. I'm not a great long course swimmer. Long course is my downfall, and I definitely don't like it back. So, um, yeah, I don't know about Olympic trials. I obviously it's my like childhood dream. Every kid's childhood dream. If you're a swimmer, like Olympic trials, is like something incredible. Like Olympic trials is like next level.
Right.
But
Right.
it's not for me. I think I'm more of a short course hero, not so much long course. It'd take a
Well, it's
lot.
hard. I mean, you got to train, like, as far as transitioning to long course too. It's hard to just go
Very
from,
hard, yeah.
in my experience, right, like short course training all the time, and that's your focus, to them being like, wait, I got to now swim a long course to fly. Like, it's not an easy, flip, at least in my own experience. So.
No, not at all. And it's like my best chance to get an Olympic trial cut would be in the 200 fly, and 200 fly short course is a completely different game than 200 fly long
Right.
course. Like that, I actually tried to go into the 200 fly long course time trial with the same strategy as my short course one. Terrible mistake. I went out slow and I had no energy to come back because I just did 50. I just did 100 with one turn, and
Oh no.
so it did not end up well. So I definitely, I am hopefully will be doing something relating to my career this summer, so I'm going to be limited with time, and I think my priority is sort of there. It would be nice to make Olympic trials, but I don't think I have enough time to qualify, as well as maybe the mental rigor to
Right.
qualify
Right.
for that as
Keep
well.
going. Yeah.
But I do have some goals for after I graduate. I want to maintain, I want to continue my relationship with swimming. Maybe whether that's train for a triathlon. I've been thinking about that for a while. Um,
Mm,
I want to train for a triathlon, but again, all those things are like those are things I can worry about when I'm done swimming. Like I have a whole nother season. So
definitely,
I think
definitely.
I'm gonna take a couple weeks, maybe even a month or two to settle down, settle into my non-athlete lifestyle here, and then I could start thinking about some goals for next season. Maybe have coach help structure those goals, and that's about it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's great. Yeah. Take, for every great swimmer, I mean, a nice break is needed. Commit a lot of time to the sport. And certainly it's warranted when, you're going for this long and you're achieving the things you are. So I think it's great. Yeah. I like how you touched on, maybe post graduation, trying to maintain a relationship with the sport. Cause I think it's an issue it's not an issue, but it's, a thing that a lot of swimmers and college athletes run into when they graduate. It's like a lot of your identity, is based around your sport. It's based around being a swimmer. And so I think trying to find another outlet where you can challenge yourself in
Mhm.
a physical and mental, kind of capability is important because I try to do that now. I
Yeah.
try to get back in the water, maybe think about triathlon. So I think it's important for other people to hear too, because there are ways to do it. But you got to kind of seek them out. So but that's far ahead, and you got all of next year and the rest of the semester to think about all of this. So
Yeah.
Justin, thanks for hopping on. Thanks for
Yeah.
sharing
Thank
everything.
you.
Just a great year. And yeah, if there's anything else you'd like to add, now's the time.
I don't think I have anything. Thank you for having me.